Hugh Freeze was fired at Auburn today. Buyout a little bit north of $15 million. This is not a surprise to anyone who's watching college football. It's not a surprise to anyone who's watched Auburn this year. 15-19 over 3 seasons, 6-16 in SEC play. And, of course, 1-5 in SEC play this year. Not getting blown out. In fact, you could make the argument, and some would, that officiating cost them the Oklahoma game. You can make the argument, and some would, that maybe officiating cost them the Georgia game. They lost the games. And, you know, if you've watched them this year, if you watched them last night, God bless you. There were other options on. Now, because I am a sick individual, I watched nearly every snap of Kentucky-Auburn. We got back from the SMU game in time for this game to start, and so I watched it wire to wire because we got to support Kublik. Kublik, the semi-rare color commentator booth spot last night, wasn't even on the field. And what a thing for a former Auburn Tiger himself to witness from the 50-yard line. So I watched it. Oh, it was ugly. It was bad. Jackson Arnold doesn't start the game. Then he comes off the bench. Then he gets re-benched. That was basically a microcosm of the Hugh Freeze era at Auburn. There will be thousands and thousands of words written about what went wrong. Why didn't it pan out? Why did Hugh Freeze fail at Auburn? And you just boil it down to 4 of them. Never figured out quarterback. That's it. That's it. There's not really a whole lot of overthinking that has to go on here. Now, with Brian Kelly at LSU, guys, there were layers to that. And I'm not saying, actually, I am saying it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty fundamental with Hugh Freeze. You know, when he first got there, when they first made the move to hire him, there were a lot of people saying, oh, does he deserve a second chance? Because he had run afoul of all kind of bylaws, both ethical and SEC, when he was at Ole Miss, and then he went to Liberty and he paid his dues and he worked his way back up. Does he deserve the right to come back? Is it a big risk? And, you know, all the reasons, all the bullet points for why it was risky, I kind of laughed at those at the time. Because I thought, man, the risk here is, does the offense still work? He's not going to get in trouble off the field anymore. This dude's getting a second chance that most people thought he'd never get. That's not going to be the issue. The issue is going to be whether you should really be bankrolling your entire future behind a guy whose resume's biggest bullet points were, I beat Saban a couple of times. Now, if you had doubts about that, okay. But the doubts about, you know, all the extracurricular stuff, I never really thought that was much of a risk. The risk, as it turns out, was on-field related. And the risk, as it turns out, was, is he going to figure out quarterback? It wasn't even the offense. I think a lot of people are going to look and say, oh, Hugh Freeze's offense didn't work anymore. Now, look, there may be layers of truth to that, too. Do we really even know? I mean, really, think about the 3 years here. Do we really even know if his offense would have worked? I can tell you one thing we know. It doesn't work if you don't have the right quarterback, which, shockingly, we have learned about a lot of offenses around college football. It doesn't tend to work if you don't have the right quarterback. You look at the NIL market, you look at the recruiting market, you look at a lot of the big dollar figures that teams are paying quarterbacks. And I know it rubs some of you the wrong way. And to those of you who feel that way, I would just advise you not to pay attention to what the players get paid. Trust me, life's a lot easier that way. But if you ever wonder why those quarterbacks get paid what they do, check out what happens when you don't have one. Ask Hugh Freeze. Ask Auburn, who's now going to have to pay tens of millions of dollars in buyout money and then hiring a new staff to make up for not paying $2 or $3 million for the right quarterback. Which reminds me, no, of course Jackson Arnold didn't work out for Hugh Freeze. But what was crazy is they went through last cycle and they didn't really spend on quarterback because they were saving up to spend in this cycle. And, you know, on the surface, I thought the plan kind of made sense. We went over that at the time. Like, they weren't going to make much noise in year 2 anyway. Why invest in a big-time quarterback and create a false bubble of expectation? Wait one more year. So that logic I was on board with. Problem was, they got to this cycle, and the quarterback market was what it was, but it was not void of options. I will never listen to that because I'm not going to turn on an Indiana game and watch Fernando Mendoza doing what he's doing and think, oh, Auburn couldn't have paid and gotten that kid. I'm not going to watch Steve Angeli even doing what he was doing at Syracuse before injury and say, oh, Auburn never could have made a run at that kid. They made a run at the wrong one. That's what they did, and it cost Hugh Freeze his job. So, look, maybe his offense wouldn't have worked out. Maybe there was too much stock put in a couple of wins over Nick Saban 10 years ago. Totally fair. I don't even know that it's that complicated. Guy just didn't get quarterback figured out. I mean, otherwise, they were a physical team, played good defense, could run the ball. Didn't matter. That just means a lot of close losses. That's all that means. So you could feel this in the spring. You could feel it in the summer. I thought it was very peculiar when he rolled into Atlanta at SEC Media Days, and I don't know what his deal was, actually. He voluntarily just started talking about expectations and started talking about how it should be playoffs. Man, look, if I thought I had the best team in the history of my organization, I wouldn't talk like that. And certainly he couldn't have felt that way. I know that because Hugh Freeze is not dumb. He's forgotten a lot more about football than I'll ever know. But even I was picking up from around the program a lot of people that were saying, hey, yeah, we're not in love with where we're at right now. And that doesn't always mean the end of the world, because you're not what you're going to be coming out of spring. Kirby Smart presents every post-spring the idea that his team could go 6-6 here. It could be bad. So, it's not the end of the world, but there were warning signs. There were red flags around Auburn post-spring. Going into summer, same thing. Coming out of summer, going into fall camp, right before that media days, just the buzz was not great. So, look, they won that Baylor game, which sort of prolonged the inevitable. I thought it was a big deal they won the Baylor game. But so the warning signs were there. It's not a shock, none of that. I think some of the criticisms are kind of lame. That's just me. I know if you're losing games, you can't be having regular tea times. You can't have a social life. You can't be perceived to be doing anything other than grinding away 20 hours at the desk. I get all that. They get paid a lot of money. It's fair. I don't even say don't criticize. That's fine. Hey, wait just a second. I appreciate you guys watching. Most of you are subscribed. If you're not, please do so. It's free. It helps us keep the show free, and that's how we do college football year-round. All right, back to the video. All I'm saying is there's some guys that are about to take their teams to the playoffs that enjoy a fair amount of activities outside the office, guys. It's not that he didn't figure out quarterback. If he had Ty Simpson playing for him or had Dante Moore down there playing for him and they did what they're doing, nobody would have cared what he was doing on Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. It wouldn't have mattered. He didn't get quarterback figured out. Hugh Freeze worked plenty hard enough, so I don't buy that. I don't buy that he didn't care. In fairness, most people aren't saying that. A few on the fringe may say it. But a lot of the criticisms, it comes with the territory. I get it. I think he gets it. But he didn't win because he didn't have quarterback figured out. So anything above and beyond that is just kind of people wanting to dunk on someone because he's on his way out. There was zero scandal. I mean, major scandal. I'm not presenting Hugh Freeze as a choir boy or anything like that, but remember what the history here is. And remember what the risks were. Oh, man, if we bring him back in, think about the risk we're running. There was none of that. The risk was not figuring out quarterback. Okay, now that we've belabored that point, where's Auburn going to go here? I got a big concern with the Auburn coaching search. So Pete Nakos put out the hot board today. And Pete has John Summerall on there. See that second name? Got Jimbo Fisher on there. And as you laugh about Jimbo Fisher being listed, I'm going to tell you don't laugh. I'll come back to that in a second. He's got James Franklin, Brent Key, Clark Lee, Eli Drinkwitz, Kenny Dillingham. I don't think Ryan Silverfield or Alex Golish would factor into this search, at least until they missed on several other candidates. Let me put it that way. So, first thing I hope Auburn doesn't do is go down the Jimbo Fisher road. Got nothing against Jimbo Fisher. I know some of you look at that name and you kind of laugh. Oh, look, what's Nakos doing? He's putting Jimbo Fisher's name on that list because there is a pretty big push behind certain scenes to get Jimbo Fisher back into the coaching world. And what you need to ask yourself is not, do I think Jimbo Fisher would work out at Auburn? Oh, no, it wouldn't be a good hire. Of course it wouldn't. But I'm not a big money donor at Auburn. So before you just laugh that off, you need to make sure all your big money donors think it's also a laughable notion. Because if they don't think it's a laughable notion, then it has some legitimacy. And all I'm saying is you might want to kick the tires around there and make sure everyone's on the same page that Jimbo Fisher's not an option here, right? Right? Okay. Because you need to get all head nods to the yes. Yes, correct. He's not an option here. Let's just make sure of that. And then the other thing that I'm concerned about is the guy who makes perfect sense for this job is John Sumrall. Why is that concerning, Josh? It's concerning to me because everyone is saying it. This is one of those instances, pretty rare, where the overwhelming sentiment, I think, is the proper sentiment, which you would think is a good thing. But in coaching searches sometimes, it's not a good thing. Because sometimes athletic directors want to view themselves as mavericks. They want to view themselves as having ideas unique unto themselves. And sometimes, you can probably relate to this in your own life. When it's time for you to make a big decision, if everyone else is telling you which decision you should make, you go the other way just to spite the clapping seals out there. And so right now, we got the athletic director down there. We got John Cohen looking around. Maybe he's looking around. And if he is, everybody's, John Sumrall, Does that make him more or less likely to view John Sumrall as the favorite? Now, Sumrall, I think, would kill it here in due time. I also want to remind everyone, I think we are looking in the rearview mirror at what it used to be like to hire a head coach and not in the windshield. In the windshield, none of the proven commodities are going to be on the move. By proven commodities, I mean top of the list, which are like Ryan Day, Kirby Smart. Like those guys, of course, are not moving. But even beyond that, you got multiple jobs that probably the market views as higher quality than yours. So, your A-listers are probably not moving. Now, it doesn't matter as long as you land a guy that you think is going to be an A-lister. That's all that matters. But you need to bake in the idea that a guy can professionally develop on your dime. What that looks like is what Oregon did with Dan Lanning. Josh, are you saying Lanning's available? No, that's not what I said. I said pay attention to what Oregon did with Lanning. They took a little bit of a risk there. Dan had never been a head coach before, but they believed in him, and so they went and got him, and they invested in him. Now the trade there is if you don't go get an established P4 winner, you pay a little bit less on the front end. They're thankful to just have the job. And they know they'll prove themselves, and you think they'll prove themselves. And as they do, then you tear up the old contract, write a new one. The beauty of that is you only pay bigger money when they win. That's part one. Part two is you got to bite the bullet and understand not everyone's a finished product. Not everyone's going to come to you ready to win a championship. Dan Lanning didn't come to Oregon immediately ready. Did you see him against Kalen DeBoer first few times he faced him? Did you see Dan Lanning in the playoff last year in the first round? He's learning on the job. But Oregon's invested in him for the long term, and so they'll reap the rewards for a long time. And they'll be in the hunt most every year. Everyone should be willing to do that, now and moving forward. Everyone should be willing to do that. Auburn should be willing to do that. Now, Summerall's already a head coach, but my point remains. Like, if anyone looks at that guy and thinks, oh, he's just a G5 head coach. And what? What does that mean? Does he have the qualities and characteristics that it takes to be the head man at Auburn, or doesn't he? How else is he going to get the experience? So the only thing that concerns me there is everybody is saying his name, and I wish they weren't. It's actually counterintuitive right now for the purposes of Auburn hiring the guy they should hire. Not that he's not the only qualified candidate on that list. There are certain other names that this is no slam dunk, guys. There are certain other names there that are going to get some major traction with that job. We'll talk about that in the coming days.